Hi guys, Mr. Cram here. If you have not already watched level 4 on conversion factors, you probably want to watch that video first before going forward with this video, level 5, on word problems. So I just got back from 2 awesome weeks in Europe. The very first place I went to was Copenhagen, Denmark. Copenhagen is in northern Europe by Sweden here. And so I had to think about, while I was traveling a lot of the time, what currency to be using. And in Copenhagen they use something called the crown, or the Danish crown, or kroner. So imagine you're in Denmark and you're going to exchange your dollars into krones, and you go to an exchange and the sign says that $1 changes for 5.58 krones. So how many krones will you have if you exchange $200? So those kind of word problems like that, we're going to address in kind of a 3-step method here. And this is not, the only way to do this. This is just a nice organizational scheme when you're looking at word problems in chemistry, or really any kind of science or math class, and how to pluck out the important information and solve the problem. So back to our currency exchange in Denmark. What do we want? What's the wanted variables? We want krones. We want to figure out how many krones we're going to get. Data. So I know that I'm starting with $200. That's from the very beginning of the problem. Sometimes at the end, but I have to know what I'm starting with. And then I also have some information in there that tells me that $1 is equivalent to 5.58 krones. So that's our domino. That's our old-fashioned domino that we use to convert things. So now you've identified the data, what's important to the problem, we're going to solve. So we're going to start with $200. That's what we're converting. And then we set up our domino. Notice it's flipped here compared to up here. That's in order so that I can cancel out dollars. Remember, when we're doing dimensional analysis, we cancel units from top to bottom. The units have to match, not the numbers. So what do I get here? I get 1,116 krones. And make sure you circulate the answer, right? Alright, so let's go through these steps: the wanted variable, the data to solve, and look at another problem and figure out how I knew all this information. Before that though, why is this important? Well, most of the math problems we're going to deal with in our class, you're going to have to read. There's going to be information there that you're going to have to find out and kind of mine that word problem for the important information. So here's a problem I took right out of your textbook about Boyle's law, gas law. It says sulfur dioxide, a gas that plays a essential role in the formation of acid rain, is found in the exhaust of automobiles and power plants. Consider a 1.53 liter sample of gaseous SO2 at pressure of 5.6 times 10 to the third pascals. If the pressure is changed to 1.5 times 10 to the fourth pascals at constant temperature, what will be the new volume of the gas? Probably seems overwhelming right now to try and answer that problem, and it should, So we're going to figure out how to address these kind of problems and not feel overwhelmed, and what to ignore, and how to find the solution. So how do we identify what's the wanted variable? And whenever we read a word problem, it's often going to be the final line, the final sentence, or part of the question that really tells you what you're looking for. So look for there first to figure out what you're looking for. So often the wanted variable is found at the end of the word problem. And then look for keywords. So something that says how many, how much, or what. Those are keywords that tell you what to look for, what you want the problem, or what the problem's asking for you to find. So here's an example. You need 2 pounds of apples to make a pie. The grocery sign says $8 per 3 pounds. How much money will the apples cost? So there's some information here. There's lots of words and numbers. The wanted variable, though, using our tips from the top, that the wanted variable is often at the bottom or the end of the word problem, and then we look for keywords. Well, I see how much in my word problem right there, right? So that's going to tell me to focus maybe on this word, money, right? And that happens to be the wanted variable here. More specifically, the wanted variable is money in what units? In dollars. So how to identify the data. So that was how to identify the wanted variable. Now what's the data? And when you're looking for the data, that's really the numbers. So you basically want to train yourself to not focus on the words here. We just want to look at what the numbers are and start collecting all that information. Make sure you include the units, though, those symbols after the numbers, whenever you're collecting data. And then finally, if you have an equivalent statement, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second, you want to turn that into a domino. So here's our original question. You need 2 pounds of apples to make a pie. So that 2 pounds of apples it has some numbers, right? It has the 2, and we have units of pounds. So make sure that is something you want to pluck out for the data here. And then we also have this $8 per 3 pounds. The per there is a really interesting word to pay attention to too. That tells you that there's an equivalence or a relationship between the dollars and the pounds of apples here. So here's my data, 2 pounds of apples, and I can make that $8 per 3 pounds into a domino, an equivalence. So those are our 2 pieces of information for this particular, sorry guys, for this particular problem. So again, 2 pounds of apples and $8 for 3 pounds of apples. Here we go. Let's solve this. So identify your starting domino, and that's going to be the piece of information that you're given in the beginning. What are we starting with? And then we arrange the dominoes to cancel units. Make sure you pay attention to the units here, because that's what's going to guide you on how you either flip a domino or cancel units. Finally, don't worry about the math until the very end. Set up your dominoes first. Okay, so here we go. We had 2 pounds of apples that we need to make our pie. We know that there are $8. It costs $8 for 3 pounds of apples. That's what the sign at the grocery said. So notice how I've arranged pounds of apples so they can cancel. Math. Now I just do 2 times 8. Everything across the top gets multiplied. And then I divide by whatever is on the bottom of the denominator, which is 3 in this case. So I get 2 times 8, 16 divided by 3, or $5.33 for my 2 pounds of apples to make my pie. Make sure you circle the answer again. Alright, so that's kind of the general sequence there. You want to identify your wanted variable. You want to pluck out or mine the data and then solve. So sometimes with word problems, though, we're going to have to deal with an answer that's a ratio. And what I'm talking about here are units that are ratios. So things like speed, where it's 2 units combined, miles and hours. So we have this ratio of miles per hour. Density is also a good example of a answer that has a ratio of units. So grams per milliliter or grams per cubic centimeter, for example. So here's an example of a type of question. If a car is traveling at 6,000 feet per minute, what is its speed in miles per hour? And then you're given a little piece of information here that 5,280 feet is equivalent to 1 mile. Okay? So, again, what's the wanted variable? So, going back to the question, take a look for a second. Have you found it? It was speed. So, we're looking here for what our speed of the car is, but not in the units given. We want to know what the speed is in miles per hour. So what's my data? I know that the car is going 6,000 feet per minute. So that is a speed, just in a different units than what we're looking for. I know that I have 5,280 feet in 1 mile. That was given at the end of the problem. And then I actually need one more piece of information here that's not in the problem. And that will happen sometimes. You have to be paying attention to the units to really get this one. You have to know that there were 60 minutes in 1 hour. And that's how we're going to deal with converting the hours into minutes, or vice versa, the minutes into hours. So how do we solve? We take our initial speed that the problem said the car was going. It was going 6,000 feet per minute. Now I know that I'm going to put my feet on the bottom here in order to cancel the units of feet. That will get me into miles. Here I put the domino of 60 minutes per hour. And notice I put the minutes on top, so that we can cancel minutes. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that the 2 units that I'm looking for, miles and hours, are the only thing that are left, and they are in the correct position, miles on top, hours on the bottom. So now I have my problem set up. I'm going to do the math. It's 6,000 times 60 divided by 5,280, and I get 68.18 miles per hour. So what should you have learned here? You should have learned how to identify the wanted variable in a word problem. You should have also learned how to identify the data or mine for the data in a word problem. Make sure you're paying attention to the numbers and the units. You kind of ignore the words. And then finally, you want to be able to solve the word problem using dimensional analysis. Hope that was helpful.